Dzień dobry. Thank you. I am so honored. The honor is really mine that I'm here today to speak to all of you. But I did just want to start by shouting out you, Kasia, because what you have done is just inspirational. How you have brought all these people here, not just today, but on the constant mission that you're on to empower women. I'm just so grateful that you exist and you do what you do. So I think on behalf of everybody, I just wanted to say a great big thank you to you. So
thank you. Thank you. It couldn't be really possible without Facebook, because Sieć Przedsiębiorczych Kobiet was born on Facebook as a page, and was growing and growing and growing, and we now have like over 26,000 people, and I think even more after today's event. And also, this is not only myself, but Dorota is always with me. We have founded the network together, and also this is a team's work. So we have Kasia, we have Magda, we have Marta, another Kasia. Who else do we have? Inga.
Here they all are.
We need to present the team. Yeah. And many, many other people who support us. Marta, yeah, and many, many other people. So thank you.
Thank you. I love these stories. Because I also know that everybody in this room, you're here because you value strong women, and you certainly are like a rock star group of strong women there. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for everything all of you do and for bringing us here. And I also know that we all believe that there's more that we can do and that we can be smarter together. And if we come together, then all of us can achieve more. And actually, I've now made it an official habit, a very good habit, that when I travel, and in my role, I look after Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Facebook, so I travel every single week, I always make sure that I either put on an event where women together, or I'm fortunate to be asked to come and speak at an event like this. So today gives us an opportunity to come together, to learn from one another, and then to leave here just feeling that little bit more empowered and a little bit more connected. And my first little bit of advice to everyone in the room is, if you haven't already met somebody new, and you haven't already taken a business card or written down a phone number or connected on Facebook, then you have done something wrong. Make sure that you leave today knowing somebody new, because connections, when people come together, extraordinary things can happen. Now, when I was thinking about today, I was thinking about what's happened over the last year or so, and I think we'd all agree that from a woman perspective, so much has happened. Go back to January last year. Do you remember the Women's March around the world? Did anybody here march during the Women's March? Yeah, quite a lot of you, yes. That's because millions and millions of women around the world in 680 cities and 137 different countries came together, and they came together to protest and to say, we've had enough. Women deserve their rights. Women deserve their human rights. We have had enough. And we saw this agitation kind of growing the whole way through the year. And then in October last year, do you remember we had the Me Too movement? The Me Too movement, millions of women coming together again, standing up and saying and sharing those terrible, terrible stories of where they'd had harassment, assault, rape. And they were saying, enough. This has got to end. And it was interesting when we came to the end of the year, Time magazine looked at the year as a whole, and their person of the year, you know, they do that thing every year, the person of the year, they called it the silence breakers, the women that had spoken out, that had shared and told their story. And I wanted to read to you what they'd written, because I think it forms a really interesting backdrop for the whole of the conversation we're having. They wrote, women have basically had it with their bosses and co-workers who don't know the boundaries and don't even seem to know that the boundaries even exist. They've had it with the fear of retaliation, of being blackballed, and of being fired from a job that they cannot afford to lose. And they've had it with the code of going along to get along. These silence breakers have started a revolution of refusal. Now, two things stand out for me. One, the courage it must have taken for those thousands of women to come out and share and tell their story. But the second is how much easier it must have been, because they knew that they were not alone. So here we are today, 2018, and this is a really important year for all of us in the room. For the people of Poland and the people of my country, the United Kingdom, it marks the 100th year anniversary of the right to women to vote. But there's a really interesting aspect in the pursuit of full equal political rights in the UK and in Poland, and actually for most countries around the world. Basically, how much time it took. Because, same as the UK, Polish women were able to get the right to vote in 1918. But exactly like in the UK, the way that we got there was really long and rocky and debacled and took a long time. And in fact, the people of Poland had rallies, they collected signatures, they ordered congresses. And there was one woman, and forgive me on the pronunciation, because I'm sure she's a rock star to you all, but Maria Dulabinianka, nearly right, was even nominated and was a parliamentary candidate in 1902, but she saw her votes null and void. And just as in Poland and in many other countries, it actually took a heck of a lot longer for full equality to sink in. Because even after women were allowed to vote, civil law regulations really narrowed it to only being married women. So you actually had to have your husband's permission to take up professional work. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine having to go to your husband and saying, "Darling, I love you. Do you mind if I take a job?" It's incomprehensible. So it always occurs to me this how long it took people to be able to recognize that that was an issue. And once there are solutions, how much time it actually then takes for these things to take effect. So here we are today, 100 years later. We all have the vote, we all have the right, we're all kind of working now. But there was a recent research done about the progress. How much progress do you think we're making? Are we making good progress? Yes. Well, I don't want to upset you or be the bringer of bad news, but we're actually making much less progress than we should be. And we are actually making slower progress today than we were 100 years ago. I'll tell you why. I'll give you an example. According to the OECD, what year do you think men and women will be paid the same amount of money? Give me some year. How long? How many years away? 30? 100? 50? Any optimists in the room? 5? No, I was kind of leading the witness there. The answer actually is, based on current trends, the year 2300. I agree. That is 282 years away. If we carry it on at the pace of change that we are going, 282 years away before men and women will be paid the same amount. Now, I think from hearing your reaction is the same as mine. That is terrible. And that is something that I reject with every single bone in my body. And everything that I do is to try and make sure that that does not happen and we bring that timescale forward. That's why I believe in leaning in. So we have to do, and it's on all of us to make sure that in every and each situation, we try and we must make a difference. And we've probably all had moments where even that pace of change could perhaps feel a little bit hopeful. Share a couple of my own stories. I was invited a few years ago to an event, little person, hello, to an event that the UK government was hosting, a breakfast about gender diversity and equality. So I got there early, and there was another woman, she got there early, and we therefore, it was breakfast, so we were at the coffees making coffees. And the man came in, who was the equality expert, and was leading the session, and he looked at the two of us, and he said, am I the first to arrive then? Give you another story. Last November, my country again, but I'm sure the stories that all of you have, I was invited by my government to a state dinner where there was a visiting head of a country, and it was, you know how the UK does its pomp and ceremony, we had these long tables, so you sit opposite one person here and two on either side. So opposite me was the chief of staff to the visiting prime minister, next to me was an ambassador, and on the other side was a very successful businessman turned philanthropist, 3 men. Whole way through the meal, nobody asked me any questions about me. I spoke to all of them. What was really fun was that afterwards I saw one of the ministers from my country and said, "How was your dinner?" I said, "Why?" He said, because we had the Prime Minister and the Chief of Staff in earlier, and they were talking about Facebook, and they were going to give you a tough time. I said, well, they never asked me what I did, so we never had that conversation. And why did we not have that conversation? We didn't have that conversation because to the three men that I was sat between and around, they had assumed, because of their bias, that I was probably there because I was married to some rich and important man. I could not have been there in my own right. And therefore, I think until the Chief of Staff and the philanthropist and the ambassador are as likely to be women as they are men, we will still have this same kind of challenge and the same kind of unconscious bias. So basically, what happens from now, that is on all of us. We are the change. We will be the change. Now, I've been at Facebook almost 5 years. I'm about to have my 5th Faceversary. And I think that it's a company that not only gets it, but is also pioneering new ways in order to become truly diverse. And we're not where we want to be. We still have a long way to go. And I am lucky and blessed that I do look around and I do see a culture of strong and inspirational leaders. And they reach out and they encourage me and they support me. But crucially, they also challenge me when necessary. But we've also put in place things and measures to really make sure that all of us are really understanding what bias means. So I'm going to ask you a question. Who here is biased? Hands up if you think you're biased. Bias, if you're biased. So I'm looking around the room, I'm thinking there's about 20 people in the room. The people who have got their hands up, you are the least biased people in the room. Evidence suggests that those that think they are not biased, that they don't judge people, I'm sorry to say, and I was one of these people too, so I'm with you. I'm definitely not biased. I'm liberal, I'm this, I'm that. I embrace. Every single one of us has bias. And so we actually went out to understand this more, and we created a course that all of the people at Facebook could go on. We didn't make it mandatory, but I am delighted and thrilled that 98%, especially of our managers, have gone through this training. And it does change the way that people think. And so I'd encourage you, go and have a look at some of the courses online. We actually put the course online because we thought it would be useful for other companies and other people to see it as well. A lot of the work we do in this area at Facebook comes from the very strong and powerful Women At groups that we have. Every office has its own Women At group that is created by people in the group. It's not top down. It comes from the people in the group that come together, put on events, and that happens all over. And these groups allow people to raise questions. It allows people to empower themselves, to encourage, to learn from one another. And because it's Facebook, they do not hesitate to ask each other hard questions. But we're not alone. I think there's lots of companies now that are starting to see the importance of that change. And especially all of you in this room, you chose to give up today to be here, to speak and to learn and to be inspired from the women around you. So you are coming together through what the largest non-profit organization here in this country that really promotes, inspires, and brings together the powerful female entrepreneurs that you all are. And just know the role that you're playing here, because each one of you is inspiring and encouraging other female entrepreneurs. You're inspiring your daughters, your nieces, your granddaughters, your female friends to think, maybe I could do that. Maybe I should place a bet on myself. Maybe I should be restless and think about what I can do. And most importantly, because you've all done it, to take your fate into your own hands. But also remember this. What we're talking about today isn't just the right thing to do. It also makes great business sense as well. There was some wonderful research from the IMF last year that says businesses that have more women at a senior level actually do better financially, and they have bigger financial returns. And my favorite figure that the research says is that the maximum return, the really big maximum return, comes when there are 60% of the leadership is women, 60%. I would be happy with 50, but it's good to know it's there. Now, if we do this, and if we are able to close the gender gap just even by a quarter, it would be an increase by 2025 of $5.3 trillion. That is the difference by bringing more women into the workplace could make. So yes, we're good for the bottom line. And I really want to make sure that all of you sitting here today think about that and really internalize what it is you're doing and the difference you're making. Because I think when I hear numbers like that it should give us all so much pride and so much courage. Because yes, what you're doing does take courage. And we can and we must, and you already are, confronting this reality that we see. Yes, we must notice our own bias, the bias that can also lead us to doubt. But then when we recognize it, that's when we show up, that's when we speak, that's when we lead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for this very meaningful, powerful, and very optimistic speech.